Today we are kicking off an annual series we do every offseason. We're looking at the offseason plans for all the NHL teams. Of course, we're going to start with the non-playoff teams. Their offseason is already underway. So today we're going to start with the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to explore their salary cap situation, review last year, see how things went, what do they have for expiring contracts, and what are the top questions facing this team into the summer. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today is video number 1 in our series for the off-season plan review. So what is coming next for the Anaheim Ducks as they get into the full tilt here of the off-season? Obviously, this is the team that finished 32nd in the NHL. They have lots of questions facing it. Lots of things could change, and we're going to get in and take a look at what those things could be. But first, we're going to recap last season, take a quick look at where things stand today. Then we're going to take a look at their salary cap space, expiring contracts, and what are the top questions that they need to answer going into the summertime. So let's start with recapping the 22-23 NHL season, which was not a kind one for the Anaheim Ducks. They were dead last in the NHL, finished with a record of 23, 47, and 12, or 58 points. They lost their final 13 NHL regular season games to secure the last spot in the standings. Obviously, like I said, just not a lot of good going on in Anaheim. This year, they scored 209 goals, which was 31st in the NHL. They gave up 338, which also dead last for minus 129. It's quite a goal differential. That's absolutely horrendous season. Special teams were not kind to them as well. They only had a 15.7% success rate on the power play, and the penalty kill was 72.1. Both of those rank 31st in the NHL. Once the NHL regular season completed, GM Pat Verbeek dismissed head coach Dallas Eakins. Of course, he was on a expiring contract, and he confirmed that Eakins was not going to be re-signed. He would not be returning to be the head coach of the Anaheim Ducks next year. So that's likely just the beginning to some changes facing this team in the offseason. Of course, Pat Verbeek's been there for one season now, certainly looking to continue to make his mark and reshape this team. The Anaheim Ducks are going to have the best odds at the NHL Draft lottery as well, which will be certainly one of the top questions they face in the offseason is who do they take in the draft. And that's obviously going to be determined by their fate in the lottery, which we'll discuss here in just a few moments. But first up, let's look at their cap space and expiring contracts. They have a fair bit. The Anaheim Ducks are in a really good salary cap situation. All salary cap numbers we're going to use is based on the NHL's projected increase of $1 million. Of course, there is a slim chance we could see the NHL and the NHLPA negotiate a higher limit for next year, but we're going to base it on the $1 million increase that we're expecting right now. So a cap of $83.5 million. Right now for next year, the Ducks only have $44.5 million already committed to contracts, and they have $39 million available. So that's obviously a substantial amount. They do have a lot of expiring deals, so they don't have a lot of contracts tied up in now, which is good. They have a lot of flexibility. That much we know for sure. Now let's take a look at their expiring deals. On the RFA side, they have some pretty substantial young players who are likely going to be prominent pieces of the future. Starting with Max Comtois, they have Troy Terry, Trevor Zegras, Simon Benoit, Lucas Dostal, and Jamie Drysdale. Now, if you look at this group, I think there's a possibility that Max Comtois may not be back. I'm not completely sold on the idea that they won't qualify him, but I think they'll try to trade him. There's been talk for over a year now that a trade might be best for him to get him a fresh start. Things have not really worked out. After a good rookie season, things have kind of stalled and gone downhill for him. But Troy Terry has emerged as a big player for them. Trevor Zegras is one of the young, exciting players in the league. Will certainly be a consistent, solid member of their top 6 for a long time. Dostal projects to be the goalie of the future, and Jamie Drysdale projects to be the long-term number 1 defenseman, or at least top pair defenseman on this team. So they have some critical pieces there that need new contracts. So obviously when they get them signed, if they go long-term especially, which I know they probably will at least on some, then that's certainly going to eat up some of that salary cap space. So they'll have to kind of pick and choose here and what they do. But certainly some critical decisions for sure. That much we do know in terms of these young players and what kind of roles they're going to play on the team going down the road. Now, let's take a look at the unrestricted free agent group, which includes Derek Grant, Jason Megna, Kevin Shattenkirk, Nathan Beaulieu, Scott Harrington, John Moore, and Anthony Stolarz. Now, as far as those UFAs go, could any of them be back? Maybe, but I could see a possibility that they don't have to really bring any of them back. I could see the possibility of maybe bringing in Derek Grant on a one-year deal, perhaps. He's been there for a fair bit of time. At this point, he's a good veteran, but they'd only need so many guys in that kind of role. So we'll see. I'm not sure what they'll do with Grant. But guys like Beaulieu, Harrington, Shattenkirk, they certainly could use an upgrade on the blue line, which we'll talk about. So wouldn't be shocked there. Stolarz, I'm not really sure how they feel there. Wouldn't be shocked if they move on, but there's some questions around John Gibson, and of course that'll factor into what they do in the goalie department. But there's a possibility at least that none of these UFAs return. I don't know that they really feel the need that any of them are that important that they have to be brought back. So we'll see where things go. I know in the past here so far it's only been a year, but Pat Verbeek has shown that if he doesn't have contract extensions in place well ahead before trade deadline, you're a good chance you're going to be moved. If you're not moving, you're probably just going to be let go or walk free. So we'll see where things go now. They also have another group of players that are going to be entering their final year. So they don't have to make decisions on these players right away, but they are players that would be technically eligible for contract extension. So some of these players might be guys they want to get ahead of. Now, considering the amount of RFA business they need to take care of, I don't know that too many of these guys are going to be high on the priority list to get done, but we might see some. Now, some of these guys could also become tradable because they're entering their final year and will be going into UFA status afterwards. So the veteran players that are going to be pending UFAs are Adam Henrique, Jacob Silverberg, Sam Carrick, and Colton White. So it's hard to say. I mean, I know with Silverberg and Henrique, they've been here a long time. I don't know that they're going to be there beyond this contract. They do have some other veteran players that are, 29, 30 years old that they have under contract now, like from last year, like Vetrano and Strome. Then they bring back Derek Grant on a short term. So like they may have enough other veterans around that they may move on from these guys. I'm not sure that they're really in the most favorable situations to be big pieces of the future anyhow. So we might see some trades involving some of these guys during the summer. If not, then they very well could be trade deadline pieces as well as we approach next year's NHL trade deadline, because I suspect the Ducks likely, not for sure, won't be in the mix for playoffs, but you never know. If they could get some good luck and some good fortune, some good changes, you just never know. Now, as far as potential RFAs that would be eligible for an extension, you look at the guys like Isaac Lunderstrom, Max Jones, Brent Leeson, Urho Vakanainen, Nikita Nesterenko. I don't know that any of those players are prominent enough that they are going to feel the need to jump ahead a year with a year left to get a deal done. We'll see, though. But they're all potential names you might hear during the offseason for contract negotiations on potential extensions. But the bigger thing here is, what are we going to be facing? One of the top burning questions facing the Anaheim Ducks as we're now in full off-season mode. Well, first of all, they need a new coach. We don't know who that's going to be. Of course, Dallas Eakins is not going to be returning, so Pat Verbeek will begin the search here to get his own hire, of course, in place. Eakins was already there prior to Verbeek coming on as general manager, so not a huge surprise that he's going to want his own person in there, that he's going to want to see them take to the next level. There's really no rumors that I've heard as of yet about some potential names or candidates, but there's lots of experienced NHL coaches or up-and-coming NHL coaches that have been in the rumor mill for lots of jobs that are likely going to be in the mix here again for this one. So we'll have to stay tuned. But certainly that's going to be a high priority for Pat Verbeek this offseason, as securing the next coach for the Ducks and figuring out who that person is going to be for the next few years at least. Of course, the 2023 draft will be coming up ahead of free agency and before you tend to see a lot of the trades. Of course, the draft itself sometimes is busy for trades too, and I suspect it's going to be a pivotal time for this franchise, considering they have the best odds of landing first overall, which they'll know obviously well ahead of time. We're going into usually it's the early part of the NHL second round. I believe it's going to be early May sometime when we do the draft lottery. That's going to be a huge, huge time for them. If they can pick first overall and have the rights to draft Connor Bedard, that is going to be a tremendous boost for this franchise. I would suspect Pat Verbeek might try to accelerate this rebuild a little bit as they're able to get Bedard. Now, if they end up not being lucky and they could pick either 2, 3, or 4 or something like that. Obviously, the worst they could do would be 3, considering that they're the last place team the top 2 spots in lottery. If they don't win either one of those, they'll drop to the 3rd spot. So at the very least, they're going to get a really good player. I mean, you're looking at Bedard, Adam Fantilli, and Leo Carlson is pretty much a guarantee to go 1, 2, 3. I don't know if we're going to see much variation of that. So they're likely going to get one of those 3 players, but there is a difference for sure from Bedard to the other 2 right now. It looks like he's quite a ways ahead of them as far as his ceiling goes, but we'll see. But the draft is going to be massive for the Anaheim Ducks. Not only could they be picking 1st overall or guaranteed top 3, they also have other picks involved too. They have 5 picks as well between the 2nd and 3rd rounds that they've accumulated in other trades, and they could certainly use some of those picks to either move up in the draft and try to get another 1st rounder, or maybe they could use those picks to get other quality NHL players that might be able to come into their lineup and help them out right away. So between picking high and having this other amount of currency here in the draft, I suspect the Ducks will be a very, very busy team. Now, of course, as I mentioned, the other questions on this roster, Pat Verbeek has work to do. This blue line needs work. Even though you take a look at the Anaheim Ducks and you look at their prospect pool, there's some really good-looking defensive prospects. I mean, you get a guy like Jamie Drysdale's not a prospect anymore, obviously coming up and being an RFA here, but they have a lot more prospect quality guys that could be, close to his caliber. They have some real good guys there, but they're not quite ready yet, and they can't put the whole NHL at the same time. But this blue line was atrocious this year. They need guys who can command at least a couple of veteran defensemen who could be decent defensively. Nothing too long term, of course, but for the next year or two to be like a bridge the gap in between these prospects turning pro and getting some experience and being ready for the NHL. But they definitely need to explore whether it be the trade or the free agent market to get some better defensemen on this team if they want to be able to have more competitive games and be tougher to play against. And, yes, if they may not make the playoffs next year because they have a lot of gaps in their team to close, but if they want to be just more competitive and tougher, they need some better blue liners. There's no doubt. So I would look for Pat Verbeek to add at least a couple in that regard to trade and free agency. Goaltending has been a big question mark. There's been a lot of speculation for over a year now that John Gibson could be traded. Of course, he's been their starting goaltender for some time, has 4 years left on his contract, so there's no need that they need to absolutely move this guy. But there's been a lot of speculation from NHL insiders that he would welcome a trade to get a fresh start, give him a chance to win before he gets too much older and his window closes. Obviously, the Ducks, though, to be honest, if they win the draft lottery and they get Connor Bedard, he may not want to go anywhere, and that could be a changing of the franchise, major change. Because if you're like I said, I would not be shocked. It's going to give this whole team a boost. You're also going to get, other players wanting to come play. You're going to get a new coach, and it could really reinvigorate this team. So I do think, though, that there's been some talk that depending on how things go, there could be a Gibson trade. And that's probably the main player on the roster besides Max Comtois that I would think would be the most likely to go. But it's really hard to say. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of interest in guys like Henrique and Silverberg. If there is, I can see them maybe trying to move them. But otherwise, getting these RFAs looked after, like Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras especially, are going to be vital and important to this team. They need to determine where they see them long-term and what kind of deals they're going to take up in their salary cap space. I mean, Jamie Drysdale's important too. I think Drysdale more likely gets a bridge deal myself. Comtois could be moved, and then Zegras and Terry, I would suspect they have good chances to get long-term deals if that's what they team and the player both want. But I would think it makes sense for them. Especially in the case of Terry, where he's a few years older and closer to UFA status. So we'll have to see. But Pat Verbeek is going to be extremely busy between looking after these RFAs, finding a new coach, maybe making a few trades with a few veterans on this team, and, of course, getting ready for the 2023 draft where they're going to be a prominent, high pick, and then other activity around it. We could see a lot of activity around the Anaheim Ducks, and I suspect they're going to look a lot different next year. How competitive they will be, I think, is largely going to be determined by their draft lottery luck or lack thereof, and we'll see what happens from there. But otherwise, the Ducks are going to be looking to make some moves and get better, tougher to play against, and get back to being more competitive next year. So that's my outlook for the offseason for the Anaheim Ducks. Of course, let me know what you think as well. What other moves and things do you think are important that they need to face this offseason? Let me know in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.